John tells us that Nicodemus came to him at night. Which means he's spiritually, think symbol, don't think literalness, spiritually blind. He can't see. When Judas leaves them, John tells us he went out and it was night. Judas when it is in the darkness. So he's spiritually in darkness when he's leaving. Switching gears. I'm going to do this real quick before we get to Nicodemus. Throughout the book of John, you have major symbols. So these are the ones that you see from the beginning to the end. No doubt you can see this motif of light and darkness right in John 1 and how we need to move out of the darkness and into the light. You have a huge emphasis on water, and that water connects to the Spirit. And of course, in the Bible, that's called living water. That's a grace, something that's moved to you. So water and Spirit, we're going to see that in this discussion between Nicodemus, and then that turns into baptism down at the second part of the chapter. And then we note glory, God's glory, and Jesus is always saying, my hour has not come. And the hour is the revealing of the glory, and the glory is revealed in the crucifixion. So throughout the Bible, he's saying, my hour has not come, my hour has not come. And then at the end, it's time. And now you're revealing the glory of God. Now, if we just take these symbols, if you think spiritually, what's the difference spiritually between light and darkness? What symbol are we using when we talk about someone being enlightened? Well, when you talk about the symbol of light and darkness, when it comes to spirituality, if someone's in the light, what does that mean? So if someone is enlightened, then are they able to see, or are they in the dark about something? So when we talk about spiritual enlightenment, it means that we can see. Now, you can see with physical eyes, not just that, but your spiritual eyes. So John, a lot of times in John, he's using the word that is reflecting your spiritual eyes, not your physical eyes. But we use the idea of light. Someone walks into the light, they can finally see reality. If they're in the dark, they can't see. So they're blind. Like when Jesus calls the Pharisees, you blind guides. You're supposed to be able to see the nature of reality, but you can't. Light and darkness is that metaphor. Darkness is like a blindness, not being able to see reality. Now, I have to point that out because it's going to come up for a minute. Next point, I'll do this pretty quickly. John uses characters, and I just want to raise your awareness about this. Each chapter holds a character. And every time there's a new character, we have to look at the dynamic of that character. What's happening? So you could go John the Baptist, the disciples, as I've mentioned numerous times, the disciples are, John shows us the path to abiding with God, but he's showing it through the growth of the disciples. They help us understand spiritual growth. Jesus' mother. So we see Jesus' mother 2 times in John. First is water to wine, and that's where Jesus says, hey, my hour has not come. And what's his hour? The crucifixion. That's where he reveals God's glory. And the second time we see Mary is at the crucifixion, is at the cross. So she's there when he announces that his hour has not come, and she's there when his hour comes. And that connects Mary to this profound movement of Jesus in the gospel. Nicodemus, we'll talk more about him in a second, but Nicodemus is a character that we have to look at the symbolic nature of his character. You have the Samaritan woman. We'll do that in a few weeks. There's so much symbolism in here. It's hard to put it all together. You have the lame man at the Bethesda pools. We'll look at him because he presents a very interesting healing that is completely different from the blind man and the pool of Siloam. So we can compare those two. Let's see. Lazarus. So he's one of these characters that shows up. And here's something about Lazarus that you may want to note. A lot of what John is talking about is ritual purity versus, say, the grace of God. Now, Lazarus dies and Jesus raises him again. I want to be clear. This is not written in the Bible. So there's nothing that explicitly says that Lazarus had leprosy or some kind of skin disease. If you have a skin disease, what's your standing within that culture when it comes to ritual purity or impure? You have to live outside the village. So where does Lazarus live? Bethany. Okay. So Bethany. Now, why do we need to know that? Okay. So every major city had a place for those with skin diseases or leprosy. You had to. And Bethany is downwind of Jerusalem, just outside the town. And so scholars think, Bethany was the leper colony. Well, yeah, now we don't know if he had leprosy or he was serving those that did. But if you're serving those that did, are you ritually impure or impure? Yeah, you're impure. You're hanging around with people who have skin problems. And so there's ritual impurity here. Now, why would scholars say this? Okay. The word Bethany, what is Bet? House. So the word Bet is house. Ani is suffering. Now that sounds like a really fun town to live in, right? Where do you live? I live in the house of suffering. But you have to flip it around. Where do you go when you're suffering? You go to the house of suffering. If somebody's sick, where do they go? A hospital. So a hospital is a Betani. It's a house of suffering. It's where the suffering go. And so Bethany, Bet-Ani, the house of suffering or the house of misery, may have been a leper colony. Now, where do we get that clue? Well, Jesus goes to Bethany and he sits down with a guy named Simon, and he's called in the Bible Simon the leper. Now, what's a leper doing in Bethany? So we have clues, right? But would John's first century audience know that about Bethany? Absolutely. So is it possible that even the story of Lazarus says, look, even in a ritually unpure state, the grace of God can raise you from the dead? It's a broader message of, whether he had leprosy or he was working with people that had leprosy. We don't know. But there's a lot culturally with the town of Bethany. We'll do more of this, but I just wanted to point some of these little teeny details that John, his audience would know, or at least somebody would be able to explain. Let me move on in the interest of time. Pilate, great conversation with Pilate. He asked that huge question, what is truth? And then when Pilate introduces Jesus, there's a mystical idea because he says, behold the man. Now, what's man in Hebrew? Well, not Ish, but Adam. And Adam, when we talked about this cosmic Adam, this first Adam that lives up in the cosmos, he's a king. So they dress Jesus as a king, and he's presented as the Adam, the Adam Kadmon, the original Adam, the one that's in the heavens that we're all made like. So there's a deep message with even Pilate in the way that he presents Jesus. Okay. Now, Okay, here, these are right across from each other. We notice with Nicodemus, you have something about light and darkness. John tells us that Nicodemus came to him at night. Which means he's spiritually, think symbol, don't think literalness, spiritually blind. He can't see. When Judas leaves them, John tells us he went out and it was night. Judas when it is in the darkness. So he's spiritually in darkness when he's leaving. You can see how John is weaving these symbols in. And then, of course, Peter, and there's probably more that we can talk about. But I just want to show you that each character that pops up, John is using to convey the message in a deeper way. And we just have to pay attention to each character and what's happening symbolically. Okay, now we're going to finish on this because now we want to talk about poor old Nicodemus because he's so misunderstood.